Hi, I'm Alex Moss, and this is SEO in 2025.
Alex, what's your number one SEO tip for 2025?
My tip is to stop obsessing about and experimenting too much with how to game the way that new technology interacts with the SERPs. So here I'm probably kind of referring more to AI overviews, and the way that's starting to take over search results pages.
So why is it so important not to obsess over things like this?
Well, I think that sometimes people do think a bit too much about every minute change, and I'm one of them that even though it's a nice thing to have to get to 100 on whatever audits or, measurements you're trying to achieve, it's not always healthy from a technical or a strategic standpoint to yearn to get to 100. Sometimes in terms of looking at what's being looked at from search engines and performance audits and things like that, being at 100 isn't necessarily still going to be the most interpretively helpful page or site to be navigating on.
Absolutely. It depends how you're comparing against your competitors, I guess.
Exactly. And some people, and especially we've been watching over 2024, the differences in how HCU or part of the core updates have been affecting sites negatively and positively. And you see discussions of people doing absolutely nothing to try and recover sites that may have been penalized and have recovered. So it begs different questions on, do you do too much? Do you do too little? And of course, that's such a massive grey area that people need to be cautious about, because SERPs are ever changing and it's more dramatic than it ever has been in the last 12 months. I mean, 12 months ago, I don't believe that many people would predict how impactful things like AI overviews would be towards the usual search behavior of an end user.
So, I mean, you mentioned AI overviews a couple of times there as well. And it's intriguing because your initial tip is, don't get too up or down about it. Don't focus on the way that technology like that impacts with the SERP. But then again, your last statement there was about, how the SERP has changed radically, and the way that I guess AI overviews could mean that many clicks don't end up through to websites and people just stay on the SERP. So, I mean, surely this is something that people need to be aware of, and what terms for their particular site are actually being served by an AI overview.
Yeah, and whilst it is going to mass adoption and it does change the way that SERPs are displayed to the searcher, my tip is not to obsess about making changes or adapting too much. So I know that there's lots of folk out there who may say, here's your AI overview strategy. I'm using AI overview as it's the most prominent change that we've seen besides the core updates themselves. And people are doing strategies now to ensure that they have as much exposure as they can, specifically on AI overviews. I would say not to go too heavy into them. Of course, consider them. They're now a big impact, but the technology and the way in which it's displayed is changing, yes, but the ethics on marketing and SEO are essentially the same. Don't abuse it. Don't try to abuse it. Otherwise, you may be penalized later on in life, in the domain's life.
Sorry,
not as you. I'm not saying, be a black hat and karma will happen later on. It's not that wide.
So, I mean, how do you know when to react? How do you know that a change has rolled out that will impact SEO forever and you need to change your strategy?
Well, think backwards, reverse engineer, and pretend for a second that it isn't there. So there's a new way of the way in which people are exposed to your brand or a product or a service that you may be selling. And again, nothing really has changed in terms of implementation from an SEO, in my opinion, that's too drastically different to what it was 1, 2, maybe even 5 years ago. The ethics are there. Make sure that your code is good, well structured. Make sure that your UX is friendly to the end user. Write and produce content for the end user, not for the search engine. And doing that will still entice things like AI overviews, which is going to still run results on page based on the search intent that you're doing and based on how helpful each site is. And whilst it's a different way of showing results. It's still going to choose variables that the old school 10 links are still searching for as well. As some of 2024's data has shown, there's a big correlation of what was in the first 10 pages of Google or a search engine is generally in an AI overview of some sort, whether that's on Google or on Bing. It's generally correlated. It's not like they're pulling up things that were on page 3 and now are on page 1, and the people who are on page 1 in the native link have to do something different. Not dramatically.
So is it a better strategy then, instead of being reactive, to maybe collate all the important changes on a SERP throughout the year, and then perhaps in December or some point towards the end of the year, sit down, review what has changed in the SERP, what is likely to have changed over the long term, and then when you're actually building your SEO strategy or your content strategy for the next year, potentially, then incorporate what you've found in there and then maintain that as a strategy over a year, no matter what happens technology-wise, in terms of the SERP, and then review it again at the end of the year, or perhaps do that on a quarterly basis. Is that a better way of approaching it?
I would say, yeah, maybe not annual, maybe a bit more than that. But from a content point of view, at least, think more about search intent. That would be like on that page, what is the intent? Because there are 4 different search intents. And it seems from what I'm seeing that more e-commerce or more commercial-based intent is winning over, say, informational-based intent from pages. So that might be something to look at in a strategy, is what are you losing out on, and are your competitors winning on a certain bit of content? And if so, what is that, and what is the intent of it? And is it helpful, again, to the end user?
Got you. Okay, so what you're saying is build your brand, build what you're known for. When people search for specific products and services, then hopefully your website, your pages on your website will surface from there. But in informational type pages, perhaps earlier up in the funnel, that's the type of content that is more likely to be served by AI overviews.
Yeah, and also from a brand marketing point of view, I think it's really important, and doing that from an off-site point of view, not an on-site point of view. It's also great to make your well-structured authority of you as a brand on your website, but things like AI overviews are taking information from multiple sites and bringing it in. So if you were to search for a brand name and it brings up an AI overview of what that is, it won't just be taking it from the brand's site, it'll be taking it from other sites. So there's the outreach element of SEO that's I think just as important, if not more important, as the content, to ensure that it all correlates with your marketing strategy on site.
Is it possible and worthwhile to optimize for AI overviews?
Specifically, now, I would say, are you optimizing for AI overviews? I would take a step back and say optimize for the intent that an AI overview interprets. If you go back to the brand marketing, you can do informational-based intent where you're trying to find out and discover about that brand and make sure they're trustworthy. Wouldn't you think, from a search experience point of view, when you're looking in the brand, you're not only going to go to the brand's name, but you're going to want to know more from a third person's perspective, like UGC or like an editorial site that isn't them. Those are things that should be really important to do. And as well as that, with commercial intent, is whatever you're explaining about something, having another intent for someone to buy something, because AI overviews, again, don't do the commercial aspect. That's for you to decide and then carry on with. And that's that connection between the informational and the commercial that I think is going to be important for AIO, to make sure that the information's there, but enough to entice them to go into the website and try and remove this 0 click that's happening for some, and try and people move intent in their search.
So we've majored on AI overviews in the SERP, but are there any other aspects of the SERP that have changed that you've seen many SEOs focus on or jump on or try to optimize for when you've gone, it's not really necessary to do that and be that reactive, you'll keep on doing what you're doing instead?
I would say local, any bricks and mortar based SEO I wouldn't be thinking about AIO. It adopts it really, really, really well, and it is a strategy you can do. But again, going back to the native strategy of local and e-commerce as well, because they're the ones where people have more of a transactional or commercial intent. and they're the winners. Whereas the informational sites out there, like we know, your small publishers that are losing out, that's where the war's being lost for site owners a bit more, is the informational element. So I would say if you're an informational site and that's your primary focus, you need to mix it up with some other search intent to make people come into the site a bit more, and to make AIO understand that there's more to the site than just information. And again, remove the zero click.
I mean, it's tough for SEOs because they need to stay on top of what's happening and why it's happening and how it's likely to impact traffic and how their brand's perceived. And also, they'll be asked internally in organizations, even if they work for agencies or if they work in-house, to answer questions. People in organizations will have questions. What's happening with AI? How's it going to impact us? What's our strategy for moving forward? So, I mean, how should an SEO answer those questions? And also, how much time per week or per month should they allocate towards educating themselves and staying up to date?
I would say at least half an hour a week. Read some articles. There's digests out there. If you're strapped for time, there are places that are specific to AI updates, and you have, like your Substack kind of sites where they'll send you a weekly digest of things that are happening, or even bullet point it. Again, AI is a benefit here, right? You can,
use AI. I was going to think, use AI to summarize it. Yeah,
exactly. So you can do those things, and there are really, really good tools out there that do that. That's the best advice, I'd say, to keep up to it. But you do have to keep up to it. And when it comes to stakeholders, things are getting harder, and it's been harder for an SEO as the years have gone on. I mean, if you look back a bit further, there was the whole not provided. We were living the life before not provided started, and we were living the life in a way that we could really connect our work with a bottom line. Many bottom line. We had so much data, and then as it's been taken away, and things have been.
But it was gradually, wasn't it? It was like 10% not provided, 20%. That was more horrific than just pulling the Band-Aid off straight away.
Exactly. It's hard. It's like giving a waiter a tip, but holding it and just giving them, £1 at a time. It's one of those annoying things. Exactly. Except you're taking the tip away, aren't you, from them in this scenario? But it gets harder and harder, and attribution gets harder and harder. But when I started in SEO, I still had to fight that fight when we had all that data. And that was weird because I used to think, well, wait a minute, there's another part of the marketing department that do, I don't know, magazine ads, right? And in the magazine ads, it just goes, go to our website, domain.com, right? Doesn't even have / something to attribute it to. And yet they never had to really fight to get more budget to go in more magazines at the time because it worked, right? And I find that weird that we still have to answer questions because it's technology and that's ever changing. But again, even now, you'll still get magazine and offsite, but offline budget that's kind of just warranted. Even now, after years and years of how the internet's grown and paper's gone down, it's still valid. It's very, very frustrating. And I think it's also because some stakeholders just don't understand the technology. And because they don't understand, they not fight it, but they'll fight SEOs because they know much more and they're trying to tell stakeholders something. And sometimes that doesn't go down well, especially in larger organizations where hierarchy happens and you're like, well, they're only an SEO, right? They don't truly know everything about, but yet you're reliant on them. So it's weird. I feel like SEOs don't get the credit when credit's due, and they definitely have the pressure if something goes wrong. So I don't think that a stakeholder, if there was an HCU site that got a positive change, I don't think they're going to go up to the SEO and go, right, I'm doubling your pay. But I'll tell you what, if the HCU hit them, their job's at risk. It's funny that it's just part of our job, annoyingly, and it won't become easier, I don't think, as the years come on, because it seems that this isn't the end of data being taken away. And we look at first party and third party cookie stuff as well. That didn't happen, but again, it will, and that will ruin some companies, the fact that that's just implemented.
If an SEO is struggling for time, what should they stop doing right now so they can spend more time doing what you suggest in 2025?
You should stop listening to me waffle so much and probably, again, go into digest very very digestible information. I mean, I host the Yoast SEO update every month. That's an hour, just an hour a month. That kind of gets you in. But obviously, I read a lot more. I read all the publications. I look at how all the products are doing. Product releases I find very interesting. You know, if a tool or provider releases something new, I always like to think, now that I'm in product myself, why did you make that? And why is that going to be so interesting for the end user? Because obviously a lot of thought was put into them. But that's what I do. And as for site, I would say audit your site again. Your own website, audit it again. Look at it from a technical perspective, a content perspective, a UX perspective. And once you've got things to change in that queue, then spend more time doing competitor analysis, especially about who's winning in areas that you want to win in. So if you find that your competitor is just getting a lot of AI overview exposure, why? What have they done? Have a look in the tools and see what they've been up to the last year.
Alex Moss is Principal SEO at Yoast, as well as co-founder and director at Firecask. And you can find him over at alex-moss.co.uk. Alex, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2025.
Thanks for having me, as always.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2025, the book, over at SEOin2025.com.